All right. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Hannah. I'm the executive director of Try Together, and we are so happy to have Dr. McArthur with us today. Um, as a licensed clinical psychologist and the co-founder and co-executive director of Resilient Futures, Laura is a leader in her field, committed to systemic change. Educated at the University of Colorado and the University of Utah, she earned a BA in psychology and Spanish literature, followed by a master's degree and PhD in clinical psychology. Her journey has also included a doctoral internship at Primary Children's Hospital in Utah and and a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of California, San Francisco, specializing in child and adolescent services. Her expertise in trauma, resilience, adult wellness, and cultural humility greatly informs her work. And before co-founding Resilient Futures, Dr. McArthur served as assistant clinical professor at the University of Colorado's START Center and program director at AUMHC, spearheading initiatives in school-based services and trauma response programs. Since starting this work, Dr. McArthur has expanded Resilient Futures' reach into higher education, early childhood education, and rural communities with trauma-informed programs. That's enough from us. So I will welcome Dr. McArthur. We're so excited to hear from you. And everyone, feel free to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to, or just say them at the end. But I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to meet you all. Thank you all for the work you do, supporting our young people in their learning. I really loved hearing about what your organization does and the work that you all get to do. What that bio didn't say about me is that I grew up on a farm in eastern Colorado, and my roots are really rural. And it was really hard in my community in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up to get access to any kind of additional supports. And just with the way we can use technology now and the ways in which we can be creative, I just love that kids are getting what they need, even in areas where maybe there aren't as many supports. One of my best friends is from Massachusetts, so my only experience with Massachusetts is on Nantucket Island. That's where she grew up. So I also know from her experience that Nantucket's busy in the summer, but there's not a lot going on in the winter, and there were often things that were challenging for her to access to. And so, yeah, as much as we had very different childhoods, one on an island, one on a farm in the plains, we also had some similarities. So. Happy to be here with all of you tonight. I really love working with educators, with the adults that are supporting students and helping them just understand some of the things that we can do to really not just amplify the way that students learn and increase their learning, but just support them in their development as human beings. A lot of kids are going through a lot of hard things, and there are some little things that we can offer them that can make a big difference. So that's what I'm going to talk to you all about tonight. I'm going to share my screen and let's see, we'll start here. So maybe it's always in the way.
I have yet to figure out how to show a slideshow full screen, so you can teach me later.
Well,
Yeah,
the little menu is always right in the way of where I need to click to share the
yeah.
slides. I have to fiddle with it for a minute. But really what I want to talk to you all about tonight is just really understanding the way that stress and trauma impact learning and behavior, just some of the basics there, and then just some strategies that you all can do to foster resilience through either supporting the kids you work with in doing these things or modeling. Kids are watching us all the time. One of my colleagues says more is caught than taught. So just by even showing up in certain ways, all of the kids that we see every day are learning from us. So the reason that understanding stress and trauma is so important when we're working with young people, but honestly, when we're working with any other human beings, is because without that understanding, we are more likely to misinterpret trauma-related behaviors. We're more likely to see, for example, kids' behavior as defiant, disrespectful, disruptive. There's so many D words that get thrown around in schools that I'm like, just kind of describe these behaviors, right? That can be really challenging for us as adults trying to help kids learn, but can be very much grounded in stress and trauma reactions. And so when we understand how those reactions are showing up, then we can offer something really compassionate and supportive that also is going to help improve their behavior, right? A lot of times we end up punishing behaviors that are related to stress and trauma reactions instead of supporting those behaviors and supporting learning. So I'm going to let Oprah do the talking for the next couple of minutes. For those of you that are familiar with Oprah, I'm just learning there's like a new generation of teachers that are too young to know who Oprah is. But Oprah did a story on trauma-informed practices several years ago now, where she talks about her own traumatic childhood and what she's learning about how trauma-informed approaches can impact her day-to-day life. And so I want to just share this brief video with you because it's been profoundly impactful for me and the educators that I work with.
A correspondent candid with Oprah
You all
Winfrey.
hear that?
Oprah, your story for 60 Minutes this week is about childhood trauma. And there's a lot of new science here about trauma-informed care. For anyone who's dealing with a traumatized child, what can they learn from your story?
Well, I think that this story is it is my hope that our story on trauma-informed care will not just be impactful, but will also be revolutionary. It certainly has caused a revolution in my own life. And I was struck by the story because it reminded me of my own childhood growing up in Milwaukee. It's not lost on me, the irony of being back in the same city, Milwaukee, where I grew up on welfare, poor, a lot of negative experiences, sexual abuse and all of that. What's the difference between a really bad childhood and being able to overcome that and a traumatic childhood and someone not being able to overcome that?
Really, it boils down to something pretty simple.
And the answer that Dr. Bruce Perry gives you is relationships.
If you also have opportunities to be connected to people in positive ways, that can buffer some of those effects. And as you get older...
I'd like to know more about that.
What he really means is love. He's a scientist, he's not going to use the word love, but it really is about how you are responded to, valued, trusted, and loved by those around you. So I didn't get it from the people who I felt I should have gotten it from. It can be anybody who cares enough about you to ask the question, what happened to you?
Could you trace back in your mind, it was that person who made the
I know
difference?
exactly who did it. I know exactly the moment I started to feel valued, and for me, it was school.
I wanted to be a fourth grade teacher because of Mrs. Duncan. And I haven't seen Mrs. Duncan since then, and Mrs. Duncan is here today. Mrs. Duncan!
The moment I felt the most value was in my fourth grade class when Mrs. Duncan said to me, I was the one who was chosen to lead the class and whatever it was.
So what was that like? I don't really remember. I do remember you.
I remember you were such a fluent reader.
Well,
if I had a class full of students like Oprah, I would have been floating on air.
Mrs. Duncan instilled in me this sense of believing that I mattered. And that is what every human being is looking for.
when you first heard that I had done something in life, did you know that it was me?
Yes, I kept up with you without your being aware of it.
And it was Mrs. Duncan who helped heal you?
For me, yes. It was Mrs. Duncan, and then it was my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Graham. It was school that made me feel a sense of value and connection.
You learned a lot on this story.
Oh, I learned a lot on this story. This story was life-changing for me.
Life-changing, really?
Life-changing. And people use that word rhetorically. Life-changing. It's changed the way I operate in my business, with my people, with my school. 1, 2, 3. You say that the most important question to ask of people who have gone through trauma is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
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 So when you see, a church being shot up, or you see, all of the headline making stories of people seemingly gone mad, your first thought is, what happened to that person?
Right.
Right. What has been life changing for me is the question, what happened to you? Not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you? Which is an important question, not just for people who have been so-called traumatized, but it's the most important question you can ask of anyone. I can say that of all the stories I've ever done in my life and all of the experiences I've ever had and people I've interviewed, this story has had more impact on me than practically anything I've ever done.
It's changed the way you see everyone?
It's changed the way I see everyone. So when I have an employee who is acting out of line or who is just being a jerk, I don't think, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that girl? What's wrong with that bro? I think, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened that caused them to behave that way. That's what this story did for me.
So, as she talks about, there's this perspective shift when we start to see the world through a trauma-informed lens. Now, this isn't a question I think I recommend that you go out and ask people. This isn't a question we would always say out loud. It's more about the mental shift, the way that we think about situations that we might be in with, in this case, the young people that you all support. So instead of, when I'm working with a teacher and they're really struggling perhaps with, a student that they work with, we might think about it like, I wonder what happened for this student, that this is how they're showing up in their classroom right now, right? That this is their response to the change or the shift or whatever might be happening. Sorry about my puppy. Um, and so it really just changes the way that we approach a situation, the way that we think. But we can also apply this question to ourselves or communities too. But I know for me, if I'm having a particularly rough day and I might, drop a few balls, forget a few things, I can get pretty hard on myself. And I know a lot of other adults who have some of that negative self-talk too. And so this can be a helpful paradigm shift for yourself as well. Like, okay, what's happening to me today? I'm dealing with this, this, and this. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm not, coming down with a cold, right? When we start to think about what's going on, it can really help us maintain that context and compassion. And this really allows for us to make space for what might be happening, which is the stress response. So when we see really challenging behaviors from others, in particular with young people that we're supporting, when we see those challenging behaviors, we may very well likely be seeing a stress response. And it could be in response to something happening in that moment, but it could also be something else that's going on, not necessarily in that moment, but that is lingering for them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But with a stress response, this can be in response to something real that happened, that's a threat, that's scary, or something that's perceived that way. So it doesn't always have to be some big traumatic event, right? Our brains are very good at keeping an eye out for threat. And if you're a child that's had some scary things happen, your brain is even better than everybody else's brain at that because your brain is really just trying to keep you alive. And so anytime there's something that might cause some sort of stress response, that alarm gets triggered and we go into that fight, flight, or freeze response. And the part of our brain that can problem solve, that can logic, that can reason, shuts down because what our brain and body are programmed to do is to put all of those resources towards survival. So if you've ever tried to talk to a kid who just like isn't hearing you and you're like, I'm sitting right here next to you, why can you not hear what I'm saying? It might be that they're in a stress response. Now, it's easy to see a stress response when it's a fight or flight response. It's harder to notice if it's a freeze response because a child might look like they're just zoning out, or it might look like they're tired. They might even fall asleep, right? Part of them is just kind of shutting down and freezing in relation to that stress response. And this can happen really quickly. And we can stay in a stress response for a prolonged amount of time if we have ongoing stressors coming at us. But with practice, we can move out of that stress response. And that's what I'm going to share with you today are some strategies that you can use, like I said, either to model or to share with the kids that you work with. But again, we're all human. We all have a stress response. So you might also want to use them for yourself as well. Are there any questions so far? Anything anybody wants to say about the video or anything that I've been sharing so far?
I just want to say one thing, which was that we have a really, like, I'm looking at the list of people who are here, and we have a huge range of people of how they're involved and Try Together. And I
Mhm.
wanted to just, after watching the Oprah video, give a special shout out to the fact that we have foster parents and kinship and adoptive families who have chosen to log on tonight, probably during bedtime. And like,
Yeah,
they are the people who are these relationships, and they are the people who are providing this love. So I just had to say
amazing.
that.
Amazing. Thank you all. I talk with teachers a lot about how you can't be that person, like Oprah's fourth grade teacher for every kid in your class. But every kid in your class needs somebody who is, right? So I love that so many of you are probably that person for a child out there or more than one in the world. So the stress cycle, we ideally looks like this. You have the stressor happen, right? Maybe for some kids, it's a big change in their schedule or, maybe a change in their placement. Um, and you get that stress response. Change can be really triggering for a lot of us with a history of stress or trauma because that feeling of things being out of your control can be really stressful. So you get that fight, flight, or freeze. Ideally, what happens, right? You survive, you connect with your loved ones, you feel free and safe in your body. And that's what completing the stress cycle kind of looks like in theory. But we often get stuck in the stress cycle. We might get stuck because we've been taught to just be nice and not let out that fight or flight response. We might get stuck because the stressors are ongoing, like an ongoing trauma. Um, or we might get stuck because it's safer, right? It might not always be the right environment to express yourself. And so we can get stuck where we're really holding that stress in our body. And what we can do then is and this sounds kind of silly, but I promise it's true, is we can speak the body's language to give our body and brain messages that it's okay to let that stress response go. And this is what we call completing the stress cycle. And these are all ways we can do that. I'm going to go over just a couple of them, but you can come back to this and really think about other ways as well that might help you get that feeling of completing the stress cycle. The feeling is, that sense of like relief when something's over, or a sense of release when you've had. So I'll go to the ugly cry, for example. If you've had that really good ugly cry and you know how you just feel kind of like terrible but better at the end of it, that is completing the stress cycle. That level, that kind of crying lets go of cortisol, adrenaline. It fosters kind of healthy hormones in the body to speak the body's language and let the body know you're safe again. You can let this go. Feels very different, but has a similar physiological kind of thing happening there. So if you can get that really great laughter going, playing, creative expression, all of these things, when we engage in them, it communicates to our brain and body that we're safe because we can't play if we're not safe. We can't laugh if we're not safe, right? So we can intentionally put our energy into something that will foster that safety in our body and it will impact our long-term health. It will let that cortisol go. It will decrease the adrenaline. Your heart rate comes down. Your breathing slows down. Your blood pressure comes down, right? These are really important physical health benefits as well. And really important for our young people who are experiencing, have had a lot of stress and trauma in their lives already to develop a lot of these practices so that they know they can find this. A couple other things I want to just highlight because of the roles that some of you might be in as foster parents or tutors or however you might interact with kids who've been impacted by stress or trauma. One is this positive social integration. This might sound kind of silly when I explain it, but I didn't really see the impact of this until the COVID pandemic started. And then I was like, oh, I get it now. So these are those moments where you just might be walking down the hall at a school, or maybe you meet someone on Zoom for a session, or maybe, somebody just comes home for the day and you just say, "Oh, hey, so nice to see you. Like, how was your day?" Or maybe you say, "Oh, I love the earrings that you are wearing today. Those are so pretty." Or you might say, "Oh, I thought of you the other day when I, saw this basketball game and I know you love basketball." Like, it might seem small, but they're really, really important moments where you feel seen by the environment, by the people around you. And so when we lost a lot of this, like these kind of like small moments in the early pandemic days, I noticed the impact of that. Another one might be like movement or getting outside. So if you have opportunities to incorporate that into your time with people who, yeah, have been impacted by stress or trauma, it's really healing. That combination in particular, moving in nature, um, turns on a part of our brain that again alerts that safety response and lets go of that fight or flight response. And then some of the others, you could think about whether or not they might work for you. Some people are huggers, some people are not. You don't have to do hugs. Um, and some people love, animals, and that feels really safe and supportive. Some people are not animal people, right? So these aren't all for everyone, but you can think about what you could incorporate, in your life and what you could model. What I see as a really powerful opportunity here, for example, is if you notice a stress response or just a level of tension with someone that you're spending time with, that you're tutoring or supporting in some way, caring for, doing some slow, deep breaths. You don't even have to tell them, "Hey, let's breathe together." Sometimes we can't hear that when we're in our stress response. But just you doing that is going to calm your nervous system. And again, that modeling piece, the part about more is caught than taught. Kids will automatically slow their breathing around us when we slow down ours. They will, their body will mirror that. We have these things called mirror neurons in our brain, and they will impact how we respond. So when your brain is in a fight or flight stress response, you can't focus, you can't learn the math problem in front of you, you can't read the paragraph in front of you, you're not taking in the information. But you may notice that with a few slow, deep breaths, the information starts to sink in. Any questions on that or any of these others? Okay. I'm just going to talk briefly then about one other aspect of resilience that I'd love to share with you all, which are what we call the 3 Cs. This is what I use a lot with teachers when they're really struggling, maybe with a particular student. And so if you have a particular young person in your life that you're thinking about, you might think through these 3 Cs as I talk about them. This comes out of a model called Attachment, Self-Regulation, and Competence. It's actually out of Massachusetts, and it's developed around what we know gets disrupted for kids and adolescents when they experience trauma. Their relationships are disrupted, their coping skills are disrupted, their sense of who they are, and their competence is disrupted. So we can foster resilience by fostering these different areas. And I'll give you an example of a kid that I was supporting to really explain this. So, teacher came to me and said, "Hey, I'm a fourth grade teacher. I have this student that I'm really struggling with. Let me tell you what's been going on. We struggled all of the first few months of school. August, September, October, November. This kid is all the D's: disruptive, defiant, disrespectful. Like we're butting heads." January came, behavior completely changed for 2 months. Everything got so much better. And now it's March and we're back to, just butting heads all the time. And so we explored the 3 Cs. And what we figured out was that during that time of January and February, when the behavior really improved, the learning improved, the regulation in the classroom improved for this student. This student was doing an after school basketball program twice a week with someone in the school that he really liked. So he was getting extra connection time with this other adult in the school who he shared a racial identity with. He was getting extra time doing the thing where he really shined. He was a really good basketball player. So that sense of competence was really heightened for him during that time because he was getting time on the basketball court a couple times a week to really shine. And basketball teaches a lot of coping skills, right? It teaches a lot of self-regulation skills. You got to speed up, you got to slow down, you got to, play together. You have to kind of work as a team. You focus on your breathing, you calm yourself down to make those shots. So he was getting some time, not a lot, right? It was only twice a week for like 30 minutes after school, and it made a huge difference in the rest of his day. So when you think about some of the young people that are in your life, you might think about where are their connections at, how are their coping skills, what's their sense of competence, or what I often say about competence is like their sense of brilliance in who they are and what they bring to the world. And fostering any or all of these areas can make a big difference. And so it could be something like teaching some deep breathing to improve the coping skills. It could be something like knowing that they, really love to draw. And so maybe you start your tutoring session by asking them about their latest drawing or artwork, the place where they really shine. And it definitely is about fostering connection, right? Really getting to know them on that level. So I'm going to pause there. I'll turn my slides off and just see what questions you have, what's coming to mind as I've been talking, and yeah, anything else.
Well, just to chime in again, I was talking to someone recently. This relates to the focus on connection and kind of what you're saying about the student, who made a referral for a student who's in a group home. So they're not living, with a foster parent. And what was really interesting was this person pointed out to me that this tutor might be one of the only connections in this, consistent connections in the student's life who is not paid to be there. And that is, that has had me now in meetings with students. I casually mention, oh, and we're all volunteers, like, because it matters. And like, especially with some of these older students who get it, like, even like, they know their therapist is paid, they know their social worker is paid. Um, yeah, so just interesting
That is
how
interesting.
much
Yeah.
connection matters, and how aware kids are of that.
Mhm. I hadn't thought about the paid aspect, but that's a really interesting component to that relationship piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had totally had not even thought of it that way, and I was like, oh, that definitely feels a little different.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And then I think the other side of this is for our tutors, there's obviously we have like boundaries. And maybe you can touch on this a little bit. Like it would not be appropriate for us to say like, well, how do I say this? It would be appropriate for us to say to align like what's bothering you today. Like, yes, I want to know what's bothering you today. And yes, if a kid in your class was rude to you, that's cool. But if it's something that like really you should be dealing with the foster parent or the social worker or the therapist, like now I have a boundary. And we do talk to our tutors a little bit about that. But I love that, oh, I thought of you when, I watched a basketball game or whatever, because that's a really appropriate way for a tutor to show that connection and to really like get in on those hobbies and that, all of that, without kind of even having to worry about it. Like that's not going to bring something out. So just another thought.
Yeah.
I just want to add on to this. The funny thing is about the video with the basketball thing. So
Mhm.
um my foster daughter basically has been having a really hard time with making friends.
Mhm.
And even like basically just speaking with people of her age group. With adults, she's amazing, the greatest kid. Like you wouldn't even think that she had a hard time making friends.
Mhm.
She started so we put her in cheerleading. It was like she felt like the ugly duckling, like the tallest one of the group in
Mhm.
cheerleading. However, she was the best one because she was like she could follow all the coordinations, and I'm like I'm like, "You did great. You did amazing." And she's like, "Yeah, but I'm the tallest one." So she didn't really kind of like connect with the group, and she was with them for already like about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Basically like 3 different seasons, and never made a connection with not even one girl on the squad. And I'm talking about they did all these things together for like about a year and a half. No connection. She did basketball for the this past season right now, it just like, let's go, come on, let's go. Like she wanted to leave. Although they're going back to school and they're gonna still see each other again, but they made a connection to the point where she's like, "Oh, mom, can I go to game on so then I can meet?" And I'm like, like I was so shocked and taken back because
Mm.
she's never said, "Can I meet with anyone?" So I was like, "Sure." Like it's like one of those things like the baby took the first steps. I always go back to that because being a parent or being someone like that sees kids, every moment that someone does something new, like for the first time, it's like one of those for me. Anyways, it's like if they do something new, I always go back to like when the baby took the first steps. So the thing is that instead of me saying, "Oh no, we can't do that," let me tell you, I canceled everything of my plans of the day and I went and took her to go and do that meet because I couldn't believe it. And for the tutoring, and I know I'm talking a lot, it's just that this program like has changed the way that the kids are able to actually interact with another adult, and it doesn't seem like a temporary person in their life. Because they've been in the system for a while, so they see a lot of people like in and out, and it's like they ask how you're doing, but they don't really care. They just know that they just need to jot it down. Whereas with tutoring, it's like basically it's another person to check in on that kid and spend some time with them. So, and helping them academically because not everyone, has the brains to be able to help them with that math or that reading or that
So true.
civics problem
Yeah.
that they can't figure out. So, either way, I'm grateful for you guys. Either way, I'll be quiet now.
And Debbie
Thank
is
you.
awesome. So,
Yeah, thank you
it's an
so
easy
much for
thing.
sharing that example. That's a beautiful example of the three C's in practice and the support that it can take to make them happen, right? Making the time to get to basketball, making the time to get together with a friend, making sure that that priority can continue to be, that those things can continue to be part of her life. And that's going to make a huge difference for her. And yeah, I think about what Oprah says in that video of like just that teacher seeing her, and seeing her potential, and just that really made all the difference. And, it doesn't even sound, when you're just like, that's all she did, but like that was huge, right? And so, just knowing that even as a tutor with like maybe not a ton of time with these kids, you're going to have that potential to really have that huge lifelong impact by them, feeling seen and feeling like there's this consistent adult who cares and shows up for me, and I must be worth something if these people continue to show up for me.
Debbie, you just made my day. So, thank you.
Mm.
Anyone else want to chime in with any thoughts?
I want to just point you all to our website because we do have a lot of free resources and there are more to come. And specifically for those of you who are foster parents or caregivers, we're going to be releasing a series in April of just short videos for caregivers, parents, families about things you can do to strengthen your coping skills as a family. Um, so please just get on our website and maybe sign up for a newsletter or something so you can get access to those when those get released later in the year.
And the website is linked in the Learn Together page on our website on this item. So if you don't grab it, it's there as well.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? Well, and Susan is in the
Hello.
chat saying this is amazing. So thank you, Susan.
Pardon me, if I may. I, let's pretend I'm a first-year teacher and have very little experience with this. Uh, my question is, what are pardon me, understanding that there's a million things that cause trauma, what are some of the more common manifestations of that? I don't care if it's as simple as a tantrum or whatever. What are people seeing most frequently these days?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it depends a lot based on the age of the students, but I work mostly in early childhood and elementary school, so that's where most of my examples come from. I think some of it is yes, you might see like that tantrum kind of behavior, kind of easily, sort of low frustration tolerance. We might think of like a window of tolerance that we all have that shrinks the more stress and trauma we face. And so it can seem like a very small thing can happen and there's maybe this big reaction to it, right? Because you just don't have any space for it. You've maybe just been through so much already that morning or already in your short life. And so it can seem like big reactions to little things. We can definitely see, I think, a little bit about, what Debbie was talking about too, just like challenges in making connections, and just taking some time to build maybe peer relationships or relationships with teachers. If you've learned that adults are not that trustworthy, you can get really good at pushing adults away in all kinds of creative ways that adults will, and we talk about this a lot with teachers, right? Like how to not kind of fall into reacting, with frustration or some of the other ways that maybe adults have reacted to this child before, because we as humans, we like familiarity, and even as very little humans, we kind of pull for those reactions that we're most comfortable with, and we maybe have just learned to just not rely on adults, and so we might just create some distance there with the teachers. We can see challenges in learning a lot because if you're in a pretty frequent stress response and kind of hyper vigilant, just your body and brain are kind of scanning for threat, listening for the loud noises, the raised voice, the slammed door. In a school setting, there can be a lot of those kinds of sensory things happening. And so it can be really challenging to just settle into learning if you're in that stress response. So we give teachers a lot of support around how to notice when that's happening and how to help kids develop some of those regulation skills that I went over, and a lot of other ones too, to make sure that they're able to, as much as possible, access that learning part of their brain. Um, and yeah, I think, you sometimes just see also some um, more sort of classic like trauma responses happening too, where you might have at least, especially maybe for younger kids, but well, for older kids too, you might have kids drawing pictures of things that are pretty scary, and you're kind of asking them, hey, what's this picture about, and you might hear a little bit about that, and you might have kids who want to tell you the same story over and over and over. That's a pretty common trauma response as well. And so just understanding those things, I think, can be really helpful and regulating for the teacher, right? To know what's going on, why it's happening, and to be able to provide some support. There's probably a lot more too that I'm forgetting, but I do think one that's the hardest to see is when kids do kind of go into that freeze response and they just might look like they're not paying attention, or they're staring out the window, or they're just, maybe doodling, or maybe they're just kind of younger kids, especially little ones wandering around the classroom. Um, so we always get, questions from teachers about the fight responses, the throwing things, or the flight responses. You got the runners, right? The kids that like flee the classroom. That's a pretty common one in elementary school. But we have to look a little harder for the kids that go into the freeze response.
Um, my name's Jeanette. Hannah knows me. My kiddo is middle school aged, and she's in the freeze response category, and that kind of like shuts down at frustrations. And so she'll like wear a hoodie, and she'll like flip the hood up and zip it up and kind of visibly withdraw.
Yeah.
And I think like those may not get as much attention as like the big flamboyant emotional response, but it definitely impacts her ability to pay attention, to stay engaged in the classroom, to learn. And so having supportive and attentive teachers who understand that emotional regulation is a challenge and are willing to support her through that have been really key for her getting a more successful pattern academically. And I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that we're turning a bit of a corner, but it's definitely not something that hasn't come without a lot of support from her teachers and a real understanding that emotional connection with the staff and feel like that feeling of felt safety has been a big piece of what's been helpful for her.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm hopeful to hear about that corner being turned. It can take a long time, even for children and adolescents, to start to unwind the connections that have been made in the brain through really stressful and traumatic situations, to see that that things could be different. So we talk to teachers a lot about giving fresh starts, and not taking things personally, and knowing that it's repetition that will create the new wirings in the brain that will give those new possibilities. So I love to hear that you've got some teachers on your team that get it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Love turning corners. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share? This has been awesome. I love hearing from all of you. If not, thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
So welcome.
Thank you for everyone for joining us. This has been so awesome. I'm so excited to put this in our training. I'm just plopping this right in because this is everything I want people to understand before they get started with us.
Mhm.
And if anyone has any, definitely visit their website and sign up for the newsletter. It's awesome. But if anyone has any questions or thoughts after this, feel free to email me. And I can pass this on to Dr. McArthur.
Perfect. Yes, yeah, please stay in touch. I'd love to, yeah, hear how things go for your organization and your community.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you for
everyone.
answering my questions. I didn't,
You're
I
so
was
welcome.
muted
Absolutely.
earlier. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation.
You're so welcome. Thanks, everyone. It was
Have a
really nice
great
to meet
day,
you all.
everyone.
Thank you.